Yes. Oh boy. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken lose for the 8th straight time. Now, the second time this season, they've lost 8 straight games, losing this one 5-1 to the Montreal Canadiens. A not very good team who's injured and young, and a Kraken team that definitely has no reason to be losing to this team. So, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the Kraken playing up to their potential, this might be one of the 10 worst games the Kraken have ever played, including the inaugural season. Now, if you're looking at it from the aspect of what's best for the Kraken long term at this point in the season, now that they're completely out of the playoff race, not mathematically, but essentially mathematically out of the playoff race, tonight hardly could have gone any better. The Kraken lost, didn't pick up a point in the standings. Meanwhile, a lot of the teams around them, like Buffalo, New Jersey, Montreal, Ottawa, and heck, even the Penguins and Ducks, who the Kraken aren't going to catch, did also pick up points with overtime losses. Still, as a fan, this is a tough one, and probably will not take that long to go over. So what the heck, let's just get through it. We start out with completely different lines, as we've kind of come used to now over the last few games than we saw in the previous game, and it really doesn't matter how the lines start out, as they look completely different by the start of the second period. In fact, more different than we've seen for quite a while, as Eberle and Beniers are split up. The first line looks completely different than anything we've seen. Anyway, the Kraken clearly are grasping at straws. Hackstall doing everything in his power to try to get something to work offensively. Nothing seems to be working, as they score 1 goal for the third straight game and give up 5 the other way, which starts in the first period with Grubauer in net. The Kraken once again wearing the Winter Classic jerseys that served them great in the Winter Classic, but now are an alternate jersey, which, well, now that they've played 7 games in alternate jerseys, whether it was the reverse retro last year or these Winter Classics after the Winter Classic, they are indoors, so not counting the Winter Classic that was outdoors. Indoors, they are now 0-6-1 in alternate jerseys. But anyway, that aside, as we get into the game, it does not get off to a great start. I'd love to say that we can just skip through the first period or even 2 periods like was the case with the Coyotes game, but the first period is where the majority of the scoring happens, and it's all Montreal scoring. It's a pretty good start for the Kraken. They get more shots on goal. In fact, by the halfway point of the first period, the Kraken have 9 shots to just 2 for the Canadiens. But both of those shots for the Canadiens ended up in the back of the net, and really neither one of them was Grubauer's fault. The first one, he actually plays perfectly well as the shot comes on net, but Alexiak tries to block that shot with his stick. Instead, it goes off of Alexiak's stick over the glove of Grubauer that he had right there ready to scoop up the puck, and into the net past Grubauer to give the Habs the 1-0 lead on what still was a pretty lucky bounce, even to go off Alexiak's stick and not hit Grubauer or his glove. And then the second one, well, Grubauer's just completely screened here. He can never see the shot coming, and it is tipped pretty well on the way in. This is just a nice tip and a nice screen. You'd probably like a little bit better defense from Dumoulin here to clear out the front of the net so Grubauer can see the shot in the first place. But you gotta tip your cap to the Habs, taking advantage of that opportunity with the screen and getting the nice tip on the way in. Still, it's 2-0, 2 shots in, and while I wouldn't put either one on Grubauer, it's definitely not off to a good start. Now, even in spite of all of that, if you still want to look for reasons to be, I don't know if optimistic's the right word, but think positively or look for the good parts of what the Kraken have done to this point in the game, and honestly, it stays true pretty much throughout the entirety of the game. They do definitely have momentum for the vast majority of the game and this first period, at least when it comes to puck possession and offensive zone time. Neither one of which are things the Habs really have much of over the course of this entire game. I suppose they do get the majority, I think 9 of their 17 shots on goal over the course of the game in this first period. So at least there's that, but 2 more of those shots end up going in. So while the Kraken are at least responding with more pressure back the other way every time they let in a goal, Grubauer does end up letting in 4 of the first 7 shots on goal, and while the first 2 weren't really his fault, and really even the third one I would say mostly isn't his fault for a lot of the same reasons that we talked about a lot at the beginning of the inaugural season, where it's just a horrible defensive miscue and miscommunication from the Kraken that allows a 2-on-1 rush to come back down the other way, and a wide open shot from a dangerous location with all the time in the world to pick his spot and take that shot for one of the best shooters that the Habs have in Nick Suzuki. And yeah, at this point in the game, it probably is a save that you need Grubauer to make, even if it is a difficult one. And unlike the first 2, there's no screen or weird bounce or tip on the way into the net. Still, this one is really born out of that horrible defensive miscue by the Kraken. It ends up being a 2-on-1 because the Habs break out of their end of the ice as Tolvanen's coming in on the change, and Tolvanen must not have seen that Larson had been pinched deep into the offensive end, so the guy that he was changing for was actually acting as the second defenseman while Larson was pinched into the offensive end. So instead, Tolvanen comes rushing into the offensive end, straight down in the middle of it, but at this point, the Habs already have the puck, and it just takes one pass to set Suzuki loose on that 2-on-1, as Tolvanen comes crashing in, way overextending. And just like that, the puck is in the back of the net, and it's 3-0. And then a few seconds later, this one is on Grubauer. You just absolutely need a save here. It's a bit of a soft goal, and again, it's not an ideal defensive play by the Kraken to allow this shot to happen in the first place, but it's one that just goes straight through the 5-hole, right back in the offensive end off the faceoff. And at that point, Grubauer gets pulled, having let in, again, 4 goals on 7 shots. Decord goes in and honestly plays pretty well over the course of this game. He does make a couple of pretty big saves for the Kraken as they continue to be a defensive mess entirely in front of him. Though even with all that going on, we still did get a sliver of hope at the start of the second period, as less than a minute in, the Kraken end up scoring. It's a rush chance and really not a very good goal to let in on that end of the ice, as it's a shot from well out down along the boards from Eberle that's just an absolutely perfect snipe into the top corner of the net near side that puts the Kraken on the board, so at least they're not going to get shut out. And then not long after, the Habs end up on a power play, but that turns into a Kraken power play with some overlap time at 4-on-4, where the Kraken actually got a good chance in that 4-on-4. Eventually, they get going on the power play, and in that chance on the power play, it's a shot from Bjorkstrand as the Kraken do a pretty good job of moving players around and cycling the puck. It goes on net, and it's tipped perfectly in front by Beniers, who's also screening the goaltender. It goes in, giving the Kraken their second goal in the first 5 minutes of the second period, cutting the lead in half. But unfortunately, it would not stand, as Beniers on the entry before that whole play happens in the first place ends up putting himself just barely offside as he passes the puck along the blue line and then can't quite drag his skate long enough to have it not go over the blue line before the puck fully crosses. It's the difference of an inch or two, but at the end of the day, that's all the difference that it matters to take this one off the board. And the Kraken really never seemed to regain any sort of mojo, or they still massively outshoot the Habs. By the end of the game, the shots on goal are 37-17 in favor of the Kraken. But while they do get all those shots on goal, getting close to the 42 shots on goal franchise record, they really don't generate that much as far as dangerous opportunities are concerned. I suppose Burakovsky does have a couple of pretty good looks. There's one play that Tanev sets him up really well for that actually does beat the goaltender, but goes off of Savard, who had snuck behind the goaltender, a defenseman for the Habs. So defenseman makes a save there. Another, I suppose, somewhat unfortunate bounce for the Kraken. Either way, they weren't scoring 5 in this game, and the 5th one for the Habs comes midway through the second period on a Kraken power play with 5 seconds left. The Kraken down Riker Evans at this point, as he left in the first period with a lower body injury, don't have their second quarterback, so then they decide to go 5 forwards on this second power play unit. And the problem with 5 forwards is that while it does maybe make you a little more dangerous in the offensive end, it definitely makes you more vulnerable to breakaways the other way, which is what happens, and a defenseman, of all people, for the Habs ends up scoring shorthanded. A nice play to wrap it around Decord, just barely getting it into the side of the net. That shorthanded goal makes it 5-1, and that's essentially how the game ends. Sure, at this point, there's still almost a period and a half left of play, but nothing really happens throughout the rest of the second period, and the third is pretty uneventful. Again, the Kraken are just racking up the shot total, but most of them are wide open shots with no screens or no real traffic around the net, so they're easy saves to make for the goaltender, aside from the couple of good looks that Burakovsky had, one of which was a spectacular save by Montreal's goaltender. Still, it's the difference of 5-2 to 5-1. This is a game for the Kraken that, at the end of it, I think I've said this once before this season, if I want to say, it might have been the game against Minnesota earlier on in February or early March, where Hackstall was about as mad as I've ever seen him. And after this game, it might have been even worse. You could tell that he wanted to let out a lot of words that would not have gone well over on TV. There's coaches in the NHL in years past that would have let loose, and the entire post-game interview would have just been the beep sound. But, yeah, you could read between the lines and tell that he was very, very displeased. Alluded to some big changes needing to be made. I don't know what that's going to look like. They don't have a ton of options other than just bringing up guys from the AHL and sitting guys that they don't feel like are playing well, which could very well be what we see in the next little bit. That having been said, Coachella Valley clinched their berth to the playoffs, so I don't know how much you want to risk their playoff run by bringing guys up for what really is meaningless games for the Kraken just to send a message. Maybe it's a message that needs to be sent, and some of those guys probably will be up, like Shane Wright probably will be, and Ryan Winterton maybe will be ready next season, so we get a little bit more NHL experience. Now, those two guys have already played 6 games, so you wouldn't want to play them more than 3 games each for entry-level contract reasons. Either way, Hackstall very upset after the game and did allude to some, well, it could be a very interesting final 12 games of the season from a roster and lineup perspective. I suppose the one other thing that I could use to maybe further illustrate the general vibe of that Hackstall press conference after the game would be to say that, well, again, miraculously, somehow he managed to not swear during that press conference to make the editing job of Root Sports a little bit easier. I don't think I've ever heard as much weight, and probably will never hear quite as much weight put behind the word stinky as he did a couple of times in that presser. Which might not sound like a lot, but if you watch it, and especially being there in person, yeah, it just sounded a lot different coming out of him in that context after that game. Anyway, all that to say, it's certainly a game to forget for the Kraken. Maybe their worst of the season, and I'm even including the 2-0 shutout at the hands of the Sharks, who are one of the worst teams in NHL history still at this point in the season. I mean, not by point total. They managed to at least get some wins over the course of the year, but that team is horrendous, and the Kraken got shut out by them in San Jose, where they're especially terrible. Even including that game, though, this might be their worst of the season when it comes to an effort standpoint from the team, and that's even acknowledging that, again, they got 37 shots on goal. Just a horrible performance, so we're not going to do Kraken 3 stars. I guess the other positive from a looking to the future standpoint, aside from the Kraken really helping their chances of getting a better first-round draft pick, currently sitting 8th and helping cement that spot, or even get a little closer to potentially moving up tonight, as they're now 5 points or within 5 points of both moving up on Ottawa and Montreal after this loss. But even aside from the draft and that part of the future, a couple of their current or past draft picks that are currently playing managed to lock in being points leaders in the WHL in Yager Furcus and the OHL in David Goyette. So a couple of Ron Francis picks that are looking very good, and while still probably a couple years away, both of those guys likely to play in the AHL next year. It's potentially some scoring that could be coming up, and you never know who could end up surprising at the NHL level, even if their projections right now would not be scoring anywhere near that rate in the NHL. With all that said, though, as you can probably tell, I'm really ready to be done with this game and move on, and I wouldn't say never think about it again. This is one that's bad enough that we probably will bring it up in the future at some point as an example of just how bad the Kraken can play. Yeah, we can move on from this one. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below, what your thoughts about this game are, where you are at this point in the season. I know there's already some people that, while this might not have been a fun game to watch, we're at least happy that the Kraken improved their draft chances and chances potentially getting an even higher pick with the lottery. But yeah, it's tough right now. 8 straight losses and now 2 games against the Ducks. So that's fun. Until next time, though, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless. And no matter what, as always, go Kraken.